So here's our butterfly. Let's welcome Brenda Lee.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank you all for inviting me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to each of you. We woke up to some snow on the ground this morning, but now we have some beautiful Colorado sun, and it's a wonderful day to be out and about. I want to also commend you for your efforts as Kiwanis group members. I know that you're heavily involved in work for youth, and I really appreciate humanitarian efforts and value what you're doing. But it wasn't always that way. I actually grew up in a very isolated environment where I was taught literally to be no part of this world. My goal now is to help educate people and raise awareness about what cults are in general. Right now, there are millions of cult members worldwide. In fact, the U.S. Census estimated that there were 10 million cult members in the United States alone. And there are over 3,000 different cults out there. And the danger is a lot of people don't see some of the organizations that are out there as cults. But if you don't remember anything that I tell you today, I want you to remember one thing, and that is people don't join cults. Cults recruit people. How many of you saw the movie Titanic a few years back? A lot of you did. Good. I really loved that movie. I went into it not quite expecting to feel a whole lot, but at the end I really felt connected to the movie. And James Cameron, the director of the Titanic, said that before he made his movie, he really never let in what it was like to be the survivor of the Titanic. And then making his movie brought it all home to him. And I had that same experience after watching the movie. And like James Cameron, I'm hoping that my book, Out of the Cocoon, will allow people to feel or be part of what it feels like to be a cult member, to be the survivor of a cult. Most people think that it could never happen to them. And that's one of the major dangers. But what you have to realize is even if it couldn't happen to you, even if you think you are very, very educated or strong-willed, you have to realize that it could happen to someone you love. It could happen to your mother or your father or your daughter or your son or your grandchild. And that's why education is so important. Most people think that mind control is something that, like I said, could never happen to them. But I want to now I want you to think about something else. I want you to think about the survivors of any natural disaster. When you think about, this Asian tsunami or the recent hurricanes on the Gulf Coast, what do you think a person's first thought is when they realize that they themselves are personally safe? Do you think they think, man, I'm not going to make it to that board meeting tomorrow, or I'm not going to get to work? Or do you think they care so much about their material possessions? Well, yes and no, but the first thing they think about is family. They think about their son or their daughter across town or their loved ones. And they think to themselves, did they make it out safe? Are they okay? And why is that? Because family is the single most important thing we have in this world. Family is completely irreplaceable. Nothing substitutes for family. I was born into an extremely loving Pennsylvania family. I grew up on a 150-year-old farm in rural Pennsylvania. And I remember where we would have family reunions every year where, 100 people would come from all over. And we would get to dine on, Aunt Jean's mystery casserole, and my cousins and I would go off and play in the forest, and we'd swing from vines or make mud pies from the stream or jump from my dad's hayloft in the barn. And those times were very, very precious to me at the time. Life was complete bliss for me as a child. But then something happened. At the age of 9, all of that changed. And what do you think happened? join a cult. There was a knock on the door. Somebody came recruiting. My mom was a Methodist Sunday School teacher, and at the time, and she really just wanted to learn more about the Bible. She thought she could take that newfound knowledge back to her church and help educate her church members a little bit more. So she agreed to let them in. They appeared well-dressed, nice, polite, carrying a Bible. She didn't know that making that decision to open that door to them would lay to waste our entire family, much like the Gulf Coast hurricanes recently did. Within a few weeks, she sat me down. Within 6 weeks, she sat me down and told me as a 9-year-old child that I could never speak to our relatives again. None of my aunts or uncles or cousins that I had played with all those 9 years of my life. Not even my own grandmother, her mother. And why was that? What horrible crime had they done? Well, the truth is they had done nothing wrong. All of a sudden they were seen as a threat to us. And that's one of the first signs of a cult, is they isolate you from your family. They know that your family might grab you by the shoulders and shake you and say, "What are you doing? Wake up. You're not like yourself anymore." So I want you to think about one thing. When you think about the 2 or 3 people that you love the most in your life right now, and I know you have a lot more than 2 or 3 people in your life that you love, but when you think about those people, really think about them right now. How would you feel if someone demanded that you never see them or speak to them again? How would that make you feel? And if you were powerless and you had to do what they said? That's how I felt as a 9-year-old child. And like my relatives, many things in my life became a distant memory. Many things. For the next 9 years, from the time I was 9 until I was 18, I was forbidden to have any friends. I grew up without a single friend that I could call up on the phone or go visit. And that was very difficult as a teenager. As most people know, teenagers are very social beings. Friends are a huge part of their life. I had none. I also wasn't allowed to attend any school functions, football games, theater, after-school activities. I wasn't allowed to salute the flag. I wasn't allowed to celebrate my birthday anymore, or Christmas, or Easter, or Thanksgiving, or Valentine's Day, or 4th of July, or Mother's Day, or Father's Day. Religion literally took over every aspect of my life as a child. I was told how to think, how to speak, how to dress, and who to talk to. And I was also told what I could watch on TV and what I could read. Everything was censored for me. And I was even told what to do with my free time. And the reality is I had very little free time. I attended 5 religious meetings every week as a 9-year-old child. I spent 100 hours a month, in addition to going to school, going out door to door, talking to people just like you, trying to recruit. And I have to laugh now because I was pretty much clueless as a 9-year-old. I mean, I had the world experience of a pea. And here I was, out telling people that their religion was false, and that they and their family was going to die any day now unless they joined our ranks. What did I know? And the people who answered those doors were really, for the most part, pretty nice. They didn't understand what I knew. They didn't understand that I was being psychologically and physically abused as a child. And I suffered in a lot of silence and felt very isolated from the world. They didn't know of my desperation, but I knew, and I recognized it as unhealthy because I remembered what life used to be like up until the age of 9. I remember what happiness felt like and a normal life felt like. So I refused to remain a victim, and I did a lot of things to emotionally survive, which I talk about in my book. And I'll just tell you one of these things, but I have a lot of humor injected through my book because I think it's important, and because this is such a serious subject, to let people laugh as well. But one of the things I did as a child is I journaled. Now, I couldn't keep my journal in the house, because if I did, my family would find it, and then they would have elders come over and talk to me for 3 hours. And tell me that, you need to stop thinking this way, and you're going to stop thinking this way, aren't you, Brenda? And I would say, yes, okay, I give, and it was pretty much an indoctrination process. One of the things I did is I took my journal, and I wrapped it in plastic, and put it in a plastic bag, and hid it in a log in the forest. And every time I needed to journal, or every time I needed to keep my identity intact and express who I was and what I felt, I went into the forest and I journaled. And that was what saved me for 9 years. In fact, so in 1980, I moved here to Colorado with a one-way plane ticket and $50 in my pocket. Once I moved to Colorado, I worked several jobs and I put myself through college. I was determined to make something of my life. My mother told me when I left that I would become a prostitute and thief because I was leaving God's organization. And I was determined to prove her wrong, and I did. So since I moved out here, I've established a great career. I've been divorced. I was married and divorced, but I have the gift of a remarkable son who's 15 years old, the light of my life. And fortunately for him, he hasn't had to know the dysfunction that I went through. I chose to end the cycle of dysfunction with my family and not allow him to go through that. And I'm very grateful that I did that. But once I left, I learned some interesting things, which I highlight in my book, not only about myself and about this so-called wicked world, but also about my family. And the most unsettling thing that I learned about my family is that because of a decision my family made for me when I was 9, I was shunned when I left. And my mother, my brother, my sister, my 4 nephews, and my niece are still in today, and they haven't spoken to me in 25 years. 25 years, a quarter of a century. They don't. And it's really sad to me that an organization can divide family this way. I wish my mom could have sat in an audience like the one here today to hear what you're hearing, just because my mother was a wonderful mother. And I think she would have never opened that door if they had said to her, look, someday we're going to expect you to disown your daughter. I know she wouldn't have opened that door. Today I have found peace through acceptance and forgiveness. I write in my book that the biggest revelation I had when writing my book was that acceptance of anything outside of our control is liberating. There's a saying, and I love this saying, the pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist hopes it will change, but the realist adjusts the sails. And like so many of you out here today, I've chosen to adjust the sails in my life. Not just for myself, but for others as well. Through my book and through my speaking engagements to help educate people as much as I can. Information is power. Education is power. And if you can take anything from what I've written and help somebody else with it, it could be your own family that you're saving someday. I would hate to see other people go through what I've gone through. But the truth is there are millions of people out there today who've been shunned because of their religious beliefs by family, who've lost family. My story is not unique.
sounds like you were almost planning on the minute you turned 18, moving out and getting out of the situation. I mean, was that the case?
Yeah, for me, the 9 years was like a prison sentence. It felt like a 9-year solitary confinement prison sentence. I remember every year from the age of 9 thinking 9 more years, and then that year would pass, and I'd think 8 more years, and then 7 more years, 6 more years, 5 more years, 3 more years, 2 more years. You know, I was literally counting down. Yeah, I never bought into it. I never believed it. My family did, and I did not. And I just wanted out in the worst way. For me, it wasn't a choice to leave. It was survival to leave. One of the things I did in my book is I opened up, the first chapter of my book was written when I was 12 years old. And it's a story I wrote. It's very graphic and very disturbing about what I was feeling about myself and my family as a 12-year-old child. And it makes a great beginning to my book because it takes you back to what a child would be thinking at that point. Yes?
Was everybody able to just leave, or did you have to sneak out? Or
I had to sneak out. I waited until I was 18 because I knew if I left earlier than 18, legally they could bring me back. They could have the police after me as a runaway. So I waited till I was 18. I left within a couple weeks after my 18th birthday. I ran away that day, and I write about in my book about how I ran the whole way to a friend's house, somebody that I knew that was an acquaintance from school, to ask her mother for help. And her mother allowed me to stay in her home for the next 2 weeks until I could get on my feet enough to get this apartment that I'm talking about. So, yeah, it was literally a run. It was really an escape.
And at some point during that period, your mother contacted you and tried to convince you that you were going the wrong direction?
Once I moved out, she obviously kept trying to get me to come back. And I describe this in really a lot of detail in my book, but you know, basically once I moved here to Colorado, that was when she called me up and told me, she called me up on my 21st birthday, literally, and said, Brenda, I have something to tell you. And I said, what? She says, I can never speak to you again, and neither can your brother or your sister or their families. And I knew that was coming. I knew that was their policy. And I simply said, well, then have a nice life. And that was the end of my discussion with my mother. One of the things that gets them off your doorstep faster than anything is the word disfellowshipped. Next time they come to your door, just simply look at them and say, have you heard of the word disfellowshipped? And you don't say anything else. They will turn and run because that means you've been excommunicated in their mind. They have their own lingo. That's another sign of a cult, is their own vocabulary. But disfellowship means basically that you have left and they've chosen to excommunicate you. And that's a very powerful word to throw around. I talk about it in my book. Gets them off your doorstep. They can't even say hello to you or talk to you if they hear that word. And disfellowshipped. Yes. Under the no solicitor request, I put disfellowshipped in parentheses.
And I mean, they have done so many illegal things, what you just mentioned. And how come nothing has been done? I mean, well, them, close them up or whatever.
Believe me, lots of people are trying. There have been, Dateline did a report on the abuse issue as well as the BBC. There have been multiple class action lawsuits all over the world. In fact, there's one going on right now out of Texas. A law firm is putting together multiple cases. And people are trying, but they hide under the umbrella of freedom of religion. And a lot of what goes on in the organization is swept under the carpet and nobody knows about it. People who get out are the only people who speak out about it. People who stay in a lot of cases, aren't even aware of it. I watched my nephew being physically abused as a 1-year-old child by his dad, who was an elder, and the whole entire congregation knew about it. That they used the scripture, spare the rod, spoil the child, as justification for doing it. And so there's a lot of stuff in my book that, like I said, people don't know anything about. it's really kind of disturbing. So, any other questions? No, trying to get. Thank you. And if I thanks. If you want to buy a book from me, I'll be here for a while. Okay. Thanks.